It's that time again. The time where Sonic fans such as myself flood the cinemas, but this time, we're paying tribute to the ultimate life form. Okay, to level with you all, I am a massive fan of Shadow the Hedgehog. He is, simply in my humble opinion, one of the greatest fictional characters ever created, especially in the realms of things that just go hard. I have adored him since I was introduced to him on Sonic X way back in the early 2000s, and as a 30-year-old man who refuses to let go of this kind of crap, he will always be one of my favourite characters in media. Even if the 2010s didn't do him justice, the 2020s certainly have. And this movie is a prime example. It is of course the year of Shadow, Fearless as it's also called, and Shadow has taken centre stage. He was fantastic in Sonic Prime, even if the show was a bit dodgy itself. Shadow Generations is easily one of the greatest 3D Sonic games ever made. Shadow Generations Dark Beginnings was an exceptional set of shorts. It's basically been Shadow Fever all round, and I'm absolutely here for it. But Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was always going to be the main course, and it is now on the cusp of being out. So today, I'm going to give you my thoughts. It hasn't been released in the UK as of the time of uploading, but I was lucky enough to be taken as a +1 to the London premiere by my dear friend Channel Pup, and it was so cool to meet so many of the folks there, whether they be Sonic tuber or influencer alike, and play the same game that I've played nearly every day for the past couple of months. I'm a simple guy, I just like my Shadow Gens, okay? Right, no more beating around the bush, let's get straight to talking about the movie. I'll keep this spoiler free to prevent any incidents. The film's not out yet, so there is very little point talking about spoilers because it feels like I'd just be straight up ruining it for you. Because trust me, even going into this movie with only my razor sharp timeline of Sonic Adventure 2 travelling through my head at 1,000 miles an hour, I still left completely bamboozled and amazed. Go in spoiler free if you can. I know it's going to be a bit difficult because there are some troublesome scenes making the rounds, but it is what it is, the internet is just going to do its thing. I had a hell of a time watching this movie. I know I was pumped full of adrenaline when I first watched it, but something about this movie speaks remarkably to how strong it is. Sometimes, when you leave the cinema, you're pretty high on the Kool-Aid, you're happy to accept that what you saw was just absolutely bloody phenomenal, and then, a few days later, you find your thoughts starting to wane, and you're no longer as hot on that movie as you once were. I've had that with a few of the MCU movies of late, and it's always a bit of a bugger, but that's certainly not the case with Sonic 3. I've been thinking and thinking about this movie since the moment I saw it, and it has not gone down in my estimation, it has pretty much remained the same. As a loose big screen adaptation of Sonic Adventure 2, arguably the best story the franchise has ever told, it works. There are so many punch to the air moments. As a Sonic movie, it works. It's easily the best of the trilogy. As a movie in general, it's great. It's a ton of fun, it's kinetic, it will entertain kids, and they will go through a shadow phase, as they so should. I mean, I never grew out of mine, but that's just me. Let me just say though, Keanu Reeves' Shadow is a triumph. Like his talented predecessors in the role, he brings great emotional depth to the character. His characterization is dead on to how I like Shadow being portrayed, and we get to see his friendship with Maria flourish in a way that gives me vibes of Dark Beginnings, the prequel short to Sonic X Shadow Generations. I know Keanu has apparently done his research on the part, and it really does show, because he knows how to portray Shadow at his most sensitive, effortlessly. But he also gets the determined, menacing Shadow just right. The creative team worked with him to get his Shadow down perfectly, and it shows, and this is genuinely one of the greatest appearances of the character since, well, Shadow Generations. But before that, I would have said Sonic 06, which for all its many faults, got Shadow dead on. Shadow is a complex character. He is very easy to get wrong. He should never be portrayed as just this serious, joyless edgelord who has no friends. One who takes pride in putting down people all the time. That's not Shadow. He is serious, but he is ultimately kind, the way that Maria sees him. He is just clouded by rage and grief. In the 2010s, the games and comics outright failed to get Shadow's characterization right. With the exception of Sonic Forces of all things. This has now been corrected as of the Year of Shadow. We've had incredible Shadow media portraying him as he should be. Ian Hamlin, Kirk Thornton and Keanu Reeves have all put in incredible performances as Shadow. One thing I want to say as well, I know there are probably a fair few people worried about Keanu's performance due to the new Shadow Generations movie DLC pack that just dropped, and his line readings weren't awful per se, but they weren't amazing. and I want to put that down to the direction because I have to say he is stellar in the movie, and it's really helped by the matureness that they've given him and how he contrasts off Sonic himself. It's all very well written and cleverly done, genuinely. Trust me, I ain't just gonna lap up any Shadow media if they don't get him right. The way he was in Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric genuinely pissed me off, but I'm so glad we're past that now. I really want to say he is my highlight of the movie. I really want to say he's the best thing about it because Shadow is my boy. He is an icon and he's amazing in this, but I'm not sure I can. Because there's one character, or should I say one actor, standing in the way of that. Jim Carrey's Dr. Robotnik. What a virtuoso performance. Jim Carrey was just incredible here. I've always loved that this role let Carrey become increasingly more zany and madcap straight out of his 90s comedic form, and I adored the journey that this character's been taken on. Where the first movie had him be more of an arrogant dickhead with a quick mouth and an even quicker brain, with all of Carrey's typical comedic stylings, he was still a bit toned down compared to the complete madman we know Dr. Eggman really is. But as you come to realise, that was clearly an intended part of the character. He gets sent to the Mushroom Planet for almost a year, shaves his head, grows out his moustache, and then he becomes the Eggman we know and love. But his performance in Free, easily one of Carrey's greatest performances in the last 20 years or so. This was genuinely phenomenal. And not just as Eggman too, but as Gerald Robotnik. And that's for the spoiler video. But pretty much every time Carrey is on screen, it is genuinely so much fun, so energetic. The man is a genius. His portrayal of Gerald is both completely different to how we typically know the tortured soul driven to anger that Gerald is in the games, but also fits this new version of the character who has this time survived into the present day. God, it really is weird seeing both a normal, non-crazy Gerald in Shadow Generations, then seeing this goofier version in Sonic 3. Both work for their contexts, I'll say that much. Ben Schwartz's Sonic is on tip-top form, once again playing that more youthful Sonic who really does grow up throughout this story, more so than the previous installments. This version of Sonic has been critiqued a lot due to his more childish nature, which kinda tracks because he was an isolated child, but I do get people finding his jokes a bit Well, in this one, aside from a few, moments in the first half of the movie, Ben gives his best performance in the role yet. I really love Sonic in this one. Colleen O'Shaughnessy and Idris Elba are again on top form as Tails and Knuckles, who have quite a lot to do in this. It's wonderful to see these characters banter between each other. Knuckles is very funny, but oh so charmingly earnest. These characters have been written and performed with so much heart and soul, and Tails gets so many great moments in this movie. One especially that just stands out. It's just fantastic. These characters are marvellously utilised, and you don't get the sense that they're being underserved in any way. They fit their purposes. As for the human characters, they're fine again. I would say that Tom and Maddie are great as usual. They're fab supporting characters, a light bit of comic relief. I'd say they've maybe been a touch flanderized, but nothing too critical or annoying, unlike someone else. They do have less screen time this time around, though, it has to be said. Not that I mind, though, because the story really focuses where it needs to, on the alien animals. Wade Ripple is in it.
The flames of disaster!
Bizarrely enough, the one scene that he is in, and Pup can attest to this, my jaw legitimately dropped twice. You'll see. Like, my god, the tonal whiplash in his one scene is insane. Anyway, massive shout out goes to Lee Majdoub for yet another fantastic performance as Agent Stone. Eggman's faithful to a fault without getting anything back lackey. He has such chemistry with Carrey that whenever they're both on screen, their dynamic is always a joy. And also, Alia Brown's Maria Robotnik too, who is captured wonderfully. She's a bit different compared to her video game counterpart, but the character is still represented really well in her dynamic with Shadow, and has actually added a few more characteristics to Maria that I really did enjoy. Seeing those two together as well, I genuinely felt myself getting quite choked up in places. It was like Shadow Gens all over again. The pacing in this film is generally well done. I mean, for one thing, I know there are people concerned about the 1 hour 50 runtime, but honestly, they do make up for it by having the first half of the first act fly by. You generally don't have to wait that long until the first confrontation with Shadow. But consequently, there are a couple of small parts in Act 2 that I felt slowed things down a bit. Not anywhere as much as the wedding scene in Sonic 2, but it perhaps went on a little bit too long. But hey, we can't have it all. Speaking of acts, oh boy, that third act, and I say this with about 24 years of being a Sonic fan under my belt, the third act of this movie is generally one of the greatest things to come out of the Sonic franchise. It was absolutely biblical. Even as a general moviegoer, I wouldn't blame you if you got caught up in the hype. It is just that insanely cool. It did something I never thought we'd ever see in a big budget Hollywood movie. Like, wow. I thought I was going insane. I thought I must have been dreaming. There was so much in there, it needs to be seen to be believed. Sonic Adventure 2 fans are not only feasting good, they're getting extra dessert on top. You don't even need to be a Sonic fan to appreciate just how hard AF it went. In other aspects, Junkie XL's score for this movie is a lot better than the previous two. There are two particular cues that played within the first 15 minutes of the movie that made me realise, yep, he's locked in. While there's still some of that orchestral lull that befell the last two movies, this is a much needed improvement, such as the score during the third act. Sweet Lord Almighty, I was tweaking. The film also looks fantastic. The colours are wonderful, the shots are so well executed, the directorial decisions in the third act, it all looks just so beautiful and appealing. The CGI is the best it's ever been. Shadow already has one of the best designs in video game history, but my god, it's translated perfectly here. He looks astonishingly good, all the characters do. And yes, the post-credit scenes both got massive cheers from the audience. If you know the scenes, you know why, but if you don't, please avoid. It'll be a much better hit if you can successfully avoid it. Without a doubt, this is not only the best Sonic movie since the 1999 OVA, but absolutely one of the best pieces of Sonic media outright. I have very little critiques outside of a few pacing blips in the second act, some uninspired music, Wade Whipple being a dumbass, and a couple of the human characters being wasted a tad when they did have much more that could be done with them, but nothing felt laborious, nothing felt like a chore. It was just a lot of big, damn fun. I would absolutely give it a solid 9 out of 10, and I simply cannot wait to see it again. If you go and see it, I hope you have a great time like we did. Thank you for watching my review of Sonic 3 and the first video on this channel, Dominus TV. Now if you're here from my Doctor Who focused channel, Who Chaser, then I'd like to say thank you for sticking around and giving this a chance. I will no doubt primarily be putting Sonic stuff on here, or anything that really comes to mind that I really want to talk about. Man just wants to branch out a bit, you know? If you're completely new to my content, you're just stumbling across me because of the review, well again, thank you for watching. And feel free to stick around. I'd love to do more Sonic videos. I've been meaning to do this for years, but I've just had a sudden burst of motivation to finally get it underway, and part of that was down to meeting all the various Sonic tubers at the premiere, and it was just like, man, I should really just fucking go for it already. The next video I'm working on is a little bit of an analysis across the series of how many times that the side characters have actually been reoccurring. So that's going to be a fun one to dive into. I've got some pretty interesting stats I'd love to share. So until next time, see ya!